Tell me in the comments what's your favorite dinosaur, or you're gonna become Canadian. So, today we're not gonna be talking about the usual topics, which is this country makes an underrated piece of equipment. This is gonna be more fun. We're gonna look at different and cool and weird M113s. So, we all know the M113, right? So, some time ago I talked about the BTR series, and now time for the NATO equivalent, the M113. It's a 12-ton vehicle. It carries 11 to 15 people. It's got a 50 cal on top. The engine is at the front. The exit is at the back, like a normal troop carrier should, because if it doesn't, then throw it out the window. The armor is made out of aluminium. It can withstand 7.62 rounds to the side, unless those are armor-piercing rounds from a machine gun up close. Then you are just as screwed as a BTR in the same situation. Except, unlike the BTR, the troops get a rear exit. The front is going to protect you from a 50 cal, unless those are armor-piercing rounds, and same can apply to the BTR. So the both M113 and the BTR will get penetrated by many nations. Many nations made add-on armor packages for the M113. Nations like Israel would just take it out of service for its weak armor. It's also amphibious and less uncomfortable than a BTR, although to be fair, the BTR series is armed with a 14.5mm HMG, which is it's the strongest heavy machine gun that was in mass service. So there were about 80,000 M113s produced throughout its entire service history, making it among one of the most produced military vehicles. It served in the jungles of Vietnam, the deserts of the Middle East, and the green plains of Central Europe. Today famous for its fight against terrorists in Ukraine. As long as there are parts for this, it's gonna fight. And throughout the years, multiple upgrade packages were given. And look, I'm just gonna be straight with you guys. They are freaking boring. It's usually give it a 20mm or a 25mm, sometimes a 30mm Bushmaster, and some add-on armor. You basically get this cheaper off-brand M2 Bradley. You're getting a Bradley Poor People edition. So we're gonna look at modernizations which were more interesting than that. So first off, let's start with this one. It is armed with a 60mm HVMS. This can penetrate a T-62 from about 2 kilometers frontally. Chile had a lot of M113s and some Chaffies and Shermans, and they paid Israel to do an upgrade. So the Israelis put 60mm into them. And the APFSDS and the HE rounds, well, those were pretty potent. It had APFSDS and it had high explosive rounds. And this was pretty much like a light tank which could stand up to an MBT very easily, which is not something which a lot of light tanks in modern day are able to do as effectively as that M113 could do it back in its day. Right, it had a crew of 3 dudes, driver, gunner, commander. It had 6 troops in the back, and it also had a 7.62 coaxial machine gun. The main gun would have about 80 rounds, which for a 60mm armed vehicle, this is probably the most. So you basically have what is back in the day equivalent of a very deadly IFV. And here's a little fun thing. In the early 2000s, there was this Polish prototype for an IFV called BWP 2000. It also had a 60mm, but it also had TOW ATGMs. And the hull had basically the same protection as an M113, which kind of proves that this M113 was a design that was a bit ahead of its time. And Chile classed it as a fire support vehicle for some reason, but I would class this as an IFV personally. It does what an IFV can do in modern day, which is carry troops, provide a bit of armor from common weapons, and dish out enough damage to murder an MBT of the enemy side. That's impressive. Now, to complement my last video, let's talk about the Saddam. You see, during World War II, the Americans had this cool invention. It's called the Quad 50. You can mount it on anything. It was a technical of the time. It was a fantastic weapon system, anti-plane, anti-troop carrier, anti-infantry, and even anti-tank if you somehow see a Panzer 1 or 2. Later on, the Soviets made a Shilka, which is a quad 23mm. So the Italians went, I got a bigger size. And they made the quad 25, also known as the Saddam. So as you can see, it's got four Ehrlichen 25mm guns put together. And this could fire at about 2,400 rounds a minute, which compared to a lot of modern AA systems, this isn't very fast. However, this is deadly because the ammunition has better ballistics and accuracy than a 20mm or a 23mm. So the Shilka's guns weren't as effective. Also, this could fire APDS, which, while the Shilka and the VADS could use AP, HE, and API, neither of those would get as much anti-armor performance as a 25mm APDS. Meaning, in a hypothetical situation, if for a very odd reason an IFV encounters a Saddam or Shilka or VADS, the Saddam will deal with it more effectively. Let's go back to its primary role of being an anti-air. There was also a version where the Italians added Mistral manpads onto it. And here's a little thing. Look, during the Cold War, jets would be so fast that gun AA wasn't as effective anymore. But in modern day, gun AA is actually freaking good for shooting down things like drones. Look at every anti-drone system. It's basically a gun AA with a modern fire control system. Oh, also one more thing which I have to mention about the Saddam. It had no radar. What the fuck, Italy? Next, the Philippines. Someone got a Scorpion and an M113. They left them in a hangar with a lot of vodka. And after some time, this thing was running around. So the Philippines basically contracted Israel with upgrading the M113 into a fire support vehicle. And quick word about the Philippines. You guys did an awesome job fighting ISIS in your own country. You pushed them out with mostly using M113s, V150s, V100s as well, I think. And even bought out some World War II artillery. And with that, you guys wrecked them. Any Filipino army members watching? I admire you, bros. Just one more thing I have to mention. Why do I hear so many reports about you guys selling military secrets to China? Anyway, back to the M113. So, the 76mm L23A1 from the Scorpion, it fires canister rounds, high explosive rounds, HESH rounds, and smoke. It can deal with almost any IFV, but the gun isn't stabilized, and the early Scorpion turrets had a hand crank. Later on, they got electric turret drives. So having a fire support vehicle with this armament is pretty cool. A 76mm can wreck the infantry in the open. HESH rounds can destroy pillboxes. Smoke rounds can give you a lot of cover. Canister rounds turn you into a giga shotgun on tracks. And when it comes to the anti-armor performance of the HESH round, so undoubtable wreckage of, let's say, BMP2. Undoubtable wreckage of something like a T-55. However, anything bigger or heavier than those, let's just say I'm gonna have doubts whether it can perform in destroying those. The M113 was kind of like the FAL. The FAL was the right arm of the free world. The M113 was its carrier.